Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gabbing with Gabby. And we are in the middle of the Young Lions Jazz Conservatory series. And today I have another instructor from the conservatory, Rob Thorsen. Hi, Rob. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much. I am honored to be here.
Oh, I'm so happy. I can't wait. I've been having so much fun learning about all the instructors, and I'm hoping that as people watch it, parents or students or people who are even interested in the conservatory feel inspired and by your stories and are drawn to coming to see you and learning more about the conservatory because these guys are pretty incredible. They have really great stories.
Oh,
As I said, Rob Thorsen, he is a bassist and an educator. He is one of the instructors at the Young Lions Jazz Conservatory. They are having a fundraiser on August 1st. You're going to hear me talk about it over and over and over again. It's an
good
important
word.
fundraiser. You're supporting a cause, it's a nonprofit organization. You know, they take kids from middle school all the way to high school and bring them in certain ensembles, and they audition and these kids are incredible. They really are. They're hungry to learn. They are sponges and take everything in very quickly. And these teachers are so great at lifting them higher each time. So, and especially during this pandemic, when they couldn't be together for most of the school year, they
Yeah.
did such a great job of keeping these kids connected. And we'll talk more about that later. But we want to learn more about Rob and his journey to music. So, Rob, tell us, how did you find music and how did it make its way into your heart?
I think music was always it was something I connected with fairly early on. I was certainly no like child prodigy or anything like that, but music was always a part of my life. My mom was really supportive. She played classical guitar and also recorder. And I started out playing guitar when I was I think 6 or 7. And well, actually, I showed up with a guitar to this first lesson, and he was like, "The guitar is too big for you." I was the little guy, and he said, "Try this," and it was something called a baritone ukulele, which was like the lower four strings of a guitar. And so I played that for about a year till I was big enough to handle like a small guitar. And so that was how I started. I got into playing guitar, a little bit of classical and a little bit of folk music, and really basic. And this was like in the late '60s or something. And I played guitar, and then when I got into like middle school, there was music programs available. So, and this was back in the day when like all the schools had music programs, which does not happen now. I needed to choose an instrument, and I don't know why for the life of me, but I chose a flute, and it didn't really, I don't think, fit my personality, or I just felt kind of uncomfortable and kind of not embarrassed, but I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And I remember there was like in middle school, there was like 10 flute players, and it was like 8 girls, and then this guy named John Stevens and we were like the last two chairs, like the worst players. And I just never connected to it, and I was kind of socially awkward anyway. But a couple of years later, I switched to saxophone. I think I was 13 or 14, and immediately that clicked. Like I felt like way better, and I started practicing, and I look back now and I'm just like, well, the reason I didn't feel comfortable playing flute was because I didn't really practice or apply myself. And, you put a little bit of energy into something and you reap the rewards like immediately. But saxophone was like, wow, this is cool. And I was taking some lessons, and I got into saxophone. So most of my teen years, I played saxophone. And outside of school, I was also in what was called the Optimist Marching Band. It was Optimist was kind of like Kiwanis. Like, I don't know if they're still around, but it's
I
a
don't think so.
organization like that. And we had marching bands and a jazz band, and even I think a big band. And sometimes we'd play at like ball games and stuff and go to parades all over. So it was a great experience and wear those silly uniforms and stuff. But it kind of taught me some, discipline and also kind of group camaraderie. I think it was good for me socially because I didn't feel that great with my school situation as far as who I was around. So anyway, I got into that. I was playing saxophone. I played different saxophones. I played alto, tenor, and then baritone. And I even played tuba for a while in marching band.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. What a glutton for punishment, right? You're
Yeah,
carrying
really.
around, or sousaphone, I guess it was. So I played and wasn't like, it still wasn't like something I was super like, wow, music's like the greatest thing ever. But as I look back, it was always part of what I did because I wasn't that great in school. You know, I was kind of like B's and C's mostly. It gave me a sense of identity, some confidence, and I think among my peers, you know, something that they kind of looked up to, like, wow, you play music. And it wasn't like being a rock guitar shredder or something, but even playing saxophone had a certain degree of like, you know, accomplishment to it. So I stuck with that through my teen years. And then when I graduated from high school, I moved to San Francisco and I got an electric bass at a garage sale for like 35 bucks. A cool little copy of like a Paul McCartney bass, that little Hofner. And I really took to it. I started playing bass lines and I about 6 months later, 8 months later, I met some street musicians and joined their group. It was called the Powell Street Blues Band. And I said, you know, I've only been playing bass like 6 months. And they were like, well, we really need a bass player. So come do a rehearsal and let's see what you can do. And I did okay. I hung in there. And I think the thing that cinched the deal was, so I had a van. I had a Volkswagen
I
van,
see. Yeah.
and like any band, they needed transportation. So they were like, you know, I think you're in. So, and that actually turned into a good thing. You know, once you get in a group, it's sort of a nucleus of people, but then you meet other associated people. I was already playing some upright bass and probably playing a little bit of jazz by the time I was 20, 21. And I moved to Berkeley and I met a piano player, a guy named Donnie Schweckendick, and he was lived there, and we met. There was a big conga jam session on the Berkeley campus, you know, Berkeley right across from San Francisco. And this guy Donnie had showed up, and I think this is where we first met. And he had one of those melodicas, you know, that it's a keyboard. He was a piano player, and we met and we started playing. He was like, "Oh, you should come over," and we started playing, and that's really what you need in music, I think, is that first person that really like you really see eye to eye and you start to really connect and throw out ideas. And that's one thing I love about the Young Lions Jazz Conservatory is these kids are doing that, but they're like 10 years old, you know.
Yeah.
So they get the same thing through that. But so we connected and started learning tunes and started doing gigs in like really funky little bars and coffee shops and, you know, things that didn't pay very much, but it was such a good experience. And I still have my original songbook and of all the tunes we did, and
Oh, cool.
wrote some tunes. I wrote a couple tunes, but we ended up getting a fair amount of gigs, you know, so that was kind of my first like work experience, I think. And you know, showing up and playing these little bar gigs, and I had played some in San Francisco. Some of the street bands I worked with also got gigs over there. There was a place called Gulliver's that I think is still there, right on Columbus and I think Grant Street where they cross. So I had done some like quote unquote professional gigs. Some of them were more like beer gigs plus just
Right.
20 bucks or something, but I had some experience then. But the Berkeley thing, I think, was where I really kind of started to bear some fruit. And we'd also play in the city a lot because, of course, it's just like, you know, 10 or 15 minutes across the bridge and you're there. So the Bay Area was kind of my start, my whole like fruition of all the people I met and everything, which
Right.
I still have some friends from that area, you know. I got a call when I was 23, I think, to go out on a cruise ship. Somebody had recommended me, and honestly, I'd only played upright bass, I think, for like a year and a half or 2 years. And it was kind of, they needed somebody pretty soon. They needed somebody in like 3 or 4 weeks, and it was like a 7 month contract to go
Wow.
basically all over the world, but go to Alaska and back a few times, and then China, Indonesia, I mean, we never went exactly around the world, but it was a cool opportunity. And I was like, I'm talking, the actual agent called me, this guy from Hawaii, Abe Weinstein. He was really nice. Well, he was very direct business wise, but I felt pretty confident about it. But he was asking me, like, so do you know tunes? And, like asking me a bunch of questions. And I'm like, yeah, I know tunes. And I didn't really know that many tunes. I mean, I'd played, a bunch of miles, some tunes, but you go on a cruise ship and there's people asking for like, pretty obscure tunes from the 30s and 40s and stuff. And now it would be a piece of cake. But I was like, yeah, I know tunes and, I know different grooves and I can play electric, I can play upright. And I was definitely kind of stretching myself a little bit, but I thought this will be a good opportunity. And so I took it. And it left from San Francisco, so that was perfect for them. They didn't have to fly me anywhere. And so I got on the ship, and there was 3 different bands on the ship, and I was in a 4-piece group, which was perfect. That was kind of my comfort level. We had a singer and then a piano, bass, drums trio. So we left, and the cruise director, this guy, or the booking guy, stayed on the ship for the first week to be sure everything was running smoothly with the bands.
Uh-oh.
And, it was really okay. The band I was with, everybody was like 24, 25 years old. They were nice. They were from different parts of the U.S. And the singer was also from the Bay Area. But we got along fine, the band. So there was a support network. But I remember like the second or third night, this guy, Abe, comes in, and he played clarinet, like really good clarinet. And he came in and sat in with our band. He hadn't really heard us. And he called Moon River, and I had no idea like how Moon River went or anything. Maybe I'd heard it, but it was definitely not in my realm of songs. And it's not a difficult song, but I wasn't at the point where I could fake it very well. And we played through it, and I knew he played the melody, and then he just turns around and he looks at me and he goes, "You better get your blank together." And I was like, oh my gosh. So
Uh-oh.
what I did was, and he stayed on a few days more, and I talked to him. I said, I haven't, I'm learning songs and I'm going to really work on it. So what I did was I kept a playlist, a list of tunes every night that they played that I didn't know by heart. We didn't have like iReal Pro or anything. So you really had to just use your ears unless you had sheet music there. And we also did like shows with featured singers and stuff, but that always had music. So I really focused on learning tunes. So after every night, we'd finish at like midnight, and I would go in some separate crew area and just practice songs for a couple hours, all the songs I didn't learn or know. And it was really productive. I think in like 3 or 4 months, I probably learned like a couple hundred tunes. So, and then it gives you enough basis that I could, do what's called like faking it better. I could, the piano, if I didn't have a clue, the pianist would say, well, it's in the key of E and or C and the bridge goes to E or something, and just give me a little bit of framework for it. But as your ears develop, you get a better sense of like hearing a melody and knowing like what chords are going to fit under it. So that was like really intense and good training for me. I think after a couple months, I was like fitting in fine. I mean, with the band, it was pretty easy because we played together all the time. The good things for the cruise ship were I totally got to see the world. I got to learn a lot of music. We went to Alaska 3 or 4 times, then Hawaii and Guam and the Marshall Islands, and then China, and we took inland tours into China, so I got to really experience China and Japan and Thailand and Indonesia and Australia and Malaysia. I think a couple of places. Yeah, so I got to see, like, I don't think I ever would have gotten to see those places. And I love to explore. Like, I'm really outdoorsy, and I'm pretty, like, I like physical activity. So I would, like, some of the crew would just go to bars and stuff. And I'm like, man, what a dumb thing to do. But I found people that would, like, want to hang, and we'd go, like, rent, in Indonesia, like, we rented these kind of paddle sailboats that were made of like wood and were rowing around in Jakarta, Indonesia. And,
nice.
There's a lot of cool things to do and experience in the culture and everything. So I felt like it was really a neat way to grow that way and see the world. Around 1986, my mom got sick. My parents still lived here in San Diego, which was where I grew up. And she was sick with cancer. So I came down to help my dad take care of her and just see what was happening with that. And I ended up staying pretty long. She ended up passing away about 8 or 9 months later, but I stayed. I decided to just stay because I was getting like pretty cool gigs. There was a sax player named Joe Murillo, not to be confused with a drummer, but he was kind of a big San Diego icon in like the 70s and 80s, and he was a sax player and just a real character. And he started giving me gigs, and other people did, and I was like, well, now I've been gone from San Francisco as long as I was gone on the cruise ship, so that's going to be a little bit of a like a start over thing. So I ended up just moving down here because I wanted to help take care of my dad anyway, because he,
Hmm.
they've been married like 50 years, and he was, just like needed help. He needed somebody to be there. So I came back down here, and I kind of fell in love with San Diego. I mean, there wasn't the scene right away like anything like there is now, but beginning in the 1990s, and especially, I guess Gilbert came here in like 95 or 96 or something, and maybe even a little earlier. But things started really popping in San Diego, and it went from a
Hmm.
pretty kind of sleepy, more Navy, not so artsy town into like this hub of, well, not quite hub, but not like New York City hub, but it turned into
Right.
like a scene, and it started
Hmm.
getting better and better. And I was just so happy to be here, and there's people like Holly Hoffman and Mike Wofford here. And I don't know
Hmm.
if Charles McPherson was living here back then, but James Moody was around. There was some amazing, like stellar musicians, and it
Hmm.
was a small enough town that you got to know everybody. So, um, and then San Diego kind of became my home again. My
Hmm.
dad actually passed away only 6 months after my mom, so all of a sudden I was kind of like, well.
Now what?
And yeah, I kind of felt like, I was getting some gigs here, and I had a lot of stuff to deal with, like for their life. So I,
Yeah.
I ended up just staying, and that was when I went back to school when I up in LA, and then the University of Miami was a super good music school. So I did
Hmm.
go back to school eventually because I just wanted to get more like education as far as composition, arranging, and just become a
Hmm.
better musician. It's just so
Hmm.
important to be the best that you can be.
Were you taking lessons for bass with anybody?
I studied some, not a whole lot. When I was a kid, I took lessons on saxophone, and I would take lessons here and there. I took some lessons with John Clayton, maybe like 8 or 10 lessons, who's a wonderful bassist in Los Angeles,
Hmm.
um, and a few people in the Bay Area. So I took some lessons, but I would say I'm kind of primarily self-taught. But
Wow.
I was I've gotten more and more disciplined. In my 20s, I wouldn't say I was that disciplined. I practiced a fair amount, but I've gotten more disciplined as I went on about, really learning the instrument and its history and its technique and everything.
Right.
It's pretty fascinating. And, now there's so much accessibility with YouTube. I mean, you just can't hide under a rock anymore. So it's
Yeah.
like you put on like anything, and you see all these like 9-year-old kids that are, playing Earth, Wind, and Fire bass parts and stuff, and you're like, okay, I better keep practicing, kind of thing. It's just a reminder that like there's a lot of great musicians out
Is
there.
San Diego your most successful, you think?
Yeah, I mean, every town's different, and I know San Francisco now is a really difficult place to live because the price of living up there, and there's not very many jazz clubs because of the rental prices and everything. But I always love San Francisco.
Hmm.
I mean, it sounds silly, but my heart or so whatever is kind of up
Just
there.
like that song.
I love that town, but it might almost be the memory of it that I love so much because I go there now and I love it, but I don't think I could live there and gig like nearly as much as I have here. And
Yeah.
honestly, Young Lions Jazz Conservatory is such like a beacon of light in my life. Like I love that the program and the kids, seeing some of the
Hmm.
students grow like so quickly. I I have to say, like maybe this year was like an extraordinary year, but no, every year is like really good. But I had one of my ensembles that's called New Perspective Ensemble. Um, the growth in that ensemble from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, which is only 9 months or 8 months, 8.5, it was just so great. And not just musically, but their confidence and
Hmm.
going from just like, I don't want to solo to like just taking care of business, and the
Hmm.
kids are counting off the tunes, and they're choosing tunes, and they're just doing all the things, all the things right, and
Hmm.
being around Gilbert and Bob and Charlie is such an inspiration. I mean, I don't get to see, we're all friends, but we don't get to see each other teach all the time. But when we get together, we throw out different ideas about teaching, like, what are you doing? And especially during the pandemic, it was really a challenge to, like,
Hmm.
how are we going to do this and keep the kids motivated? And, Gilbert would have ideas, and I might have some, Bob would have some. So, feeding off that, just to keep the kids motivated is so important. And they seem to really, really respond, And I got, for this one ensemble, I managed to get a couple performances right at the end of the year. Because of the pandemic, the kids didn't get to, perform that much. But they did this thing I set up a concert at this place called Polar Boat Works. It's a big boat. They restore wooden boats. It's this huge, uh,
Okay.
just warehouse kind of thing. It's right down on Shelter Island, and then they have all these beautiful old wooden boats they're restoring. But the guy's a trumpet player that runs it. His name's C.F. Kohler, and he reached out. I met him at a party, and he said, "Anytime you want to play at my venue," I say, he goes, "I have music all the time, or I used to have music all the time, and I'm so missing it." And I said, "Well, I have this student ensemble. These kids would love to do this." And so we set it up, and they came in and did a concert, and it was well attended, and they made a bunch of tips. And then he invited us to come back, and the kids performed for that, and it was like a
Oh,
paid
cool.
gig. And I was just so proud of them. And I actually had to leave early to go teach my other class, and they just handled it all themselves. I mean, I'm like, you guys don't even need me anymore. They're all like
Uh,
self-sufficient.
what
Yeah.
are the age ranges of the kids in your ensembles?
I think my youngest is 13, or, well, let's see. In my other ensemble, yeah, I think they're all like 13 to 18 for both
Hmm.
ensembles. In the new perspective ensemble, I have a 13-year-old guitar player, Tommy Reagan. In my other ensemble, Chili Chalak, who's a tenor sax player, I think she's 13 or 14. But these kids, they're so mature, so comfortable talking to adults. I mean, I look back at how my behaviors at that period, and I can't exactly remember, but I know I wasn't as mature and developed as they are.
Me
But it's just
neither.
fun. I mean, I would really, really look forward to class like every week. I mean, I remember
Yeah.
Gilbert saying, "Yeah, teaching Sundays are like the highlight of my week," and
Hmm.
I would teach Saturdays, but I would feel the same way, and I'd spend the week kind of prepping and, okay, what are we going to work on this week? Um, and it was always just so much fun.
Hmm.
It's really been a wonderful part of my life. So, like, Gilbert's so committed, and everybody is, and I work with Gilbert in some other educational components, other programs I have for elementary school kids, and the people, and Bob Boss as well, and they're so dedicated. I mean, that's really what it takes for, whatever you choose in life, is
Hmm.
that level of commitment to it, because it's
Hmm.
not about financial, you know, getting the money back. It's like giving to your community, especially when it's educationally based. I mean, that's like probably the greatest thing. I mean, I enjoy performing like crazy, and I wouldn't want to have one without the other, but the educational thing is really, really important to me.
Hmm. They kind of go hand in hand, don't they? As a performer in a local scene, you do have to supplement or add to your bag of tricks of education. It seems like everyone I've talked to so far in this Young Lions series, they all have their performance side, but they also are just as committed to their education side.
Yeah.
And whether it's adults or kids, but with the conservatory, it's great because you're bringing in kids who can't get this program at school,
Yeah.
as we mentioned before. I mean, the high school here, or our middle school in Mira Mesa is where I am. They have a jazz band, but the high school doesn't. They have a huge marching band, which
Yeah.
is, win competitions and things like that, but there's no jazz band. And when we
Oh, that's such a
started, I said, that's it, man. I'm going to do everything I can to get a jazz band in this high school. Even if it means that it doesn't start until Elijah leaves, we're going to have jazz at the Mira Mesa High School. And
yeah.
then she hired
Hoageen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he's there helping with the percussion. And so,
Oh,
fingers
man.
crossed, because then we went into a pandemic year. Fingers crossed that this coming year there'll be a jazz band. And, I wish I could take credit for it, but I didn't. But I like to say that I manifested it because I thought so hard and wanted it so
Yeah.
hard.
Well, no, Gabby, you totally get credit for it because, it that's really all it takes is one person to kind of stand up. I mean, a perfect example is the Mission Bay High School program, which um,
Yes.
I had like two or three of my students, really good students too. Dahlia Robinson, a bassist, and Connor Gilbert, a bassist, went to Mission Bay, and JP Balmont, who leads that program,
Mhm.
he had gone to Mission Bay High, I believe, and then went to college, and then after that came back and took over. The previous instructor was Ray Vanoli, but Ray was maybe had already retired or was ready to retire, and he came in and completely like turned it into one of the most incredible music programs. I mean, they're students at that age, they're like sponges, and the ones that are organized, they learn so fast.
Mhm.
I tell them, you don't have to go practice 2 or 3 hours a day. If you just like put in, half an hour, 45 minutes an hour, the more the better, but just do something every day with
Yes.
music and you won't believe how quickly. And
Mhm.
as an instructor or a teacher, instantly like who's been practicing and who hasn't. The kids think, oh, they're not going to know, and I can tell even before they play a note whether they whether they've done it. And every student's like so unique, like what they respond to. And some of the kids that at the beginning of the year, I feel like they're pretty sensitive, and so I kind of like back off. I'm not too pushy and stuff, but then they end up being the ones that all of a sudden like bloom, and the more stuff I feed them, the more they do.
Mhm.
So you just have to kind of treat everybody individually. I mean, it's still a group or a class, but treat people individually. And, you know, and the great thing is in like a student ensemble, if most of them are practicing and working on tunes and getting excited, then the ones that don't kind of feel a little left out, usually like, oh, this is serious. Like, I want to be part of this. Because the more
Mhm.
you work at it, the more fun it is. That's the bottom line. And that's kind of what I was going to say at the beginning of the school year to my classes this year. It's like, if you practice your music, you're going to have a great time. If you don't practice, it's not going to be much fun.
Yeah.
It's still kind of fun, but it's not like the difference. You see the difference in the students.
Yeah. And
So
then do you think that they feel a little bit like, well, oh, well, I don't want to let anybody down either. I don't want to be the one holding them and dragging them back.
yeah, exactly. Because I don't want them to feel like they're just accountable to me, because they're really accountable to the people in the band. And
Hmm.
that's like the biggest real world lesson. It's
Hmm.
the same thing in like the workplace or whatever you do, whatever kind of team you're part of. It's just so important to like do your part and be
Hmm.
there and show up, and that's what I remember Gilbert talking to my wife Steph a long, long time ago, like 15 years ago or something, as far as success in music. And Gilbert was like, you just keep showing up, and that just means you just keep at it, because a lot of days you don't sit, you're not like, oh wow, I can't believe I just played that solo or something. You just have to keep working on it, and you don't even see your progress, but you know that eventually it gets you to that higher level.
Hmm. Yeah, you gotta keep working hard and keep pounding away at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rob, thank you so much. How do people find you?
So on my website, which is robthorsen.com, you can find my schedules on there. And I also have a Facebook account. I don't do Instagram very much, but I'm pretty active on Facebook. But yeah,
Right.
primarily Facebook, and my website is the way to reach me and find out where I'm playing as well.
Okay, and he will also be at the Young Lions Jazz Conservatory fundraiser, The Shape of Jazz to Come. It's on August 1st. The tickets will be going on sale. Well, by the time this video comes out, the tickets will already be on sale. So you can go online to Young Lions Jazz Conservatory.com or their Facebook page, and you can click on the link where it shows events, and I'll put that link in the description below, and you can purchase your tickets early. And there's VIP options as well if you want a private concert prior to it opening up to the general public. There's a lot of really great things that are going to be going on. There's going to be a silent auction and food by Chef Joanne, and there'll be drinks and just a lot of great people. I think it's going to be a really huge event because people haven't been out and they haven't had the luxury of being able to see all their favorites that they normally would see in a
Yeah.
non-wacky year.
Yeah.
So they're gonna come. There's gonna be a lot of people there. I think it's gonna be really, really great this year, and we're looking to raise a lot of money because this money, like I said, supports the nonprofit organization where we rent a space in Liberty Station, a classroom for these kids to come and get lessons or be in their ensembles with these instructors. Sometimes it will pay for specialty workshops, the instructors, and keeping the lights on basically. So that takes some money. So we need to raise a
Absolutely.
lot of money, especially since we didn't have one last year. So
Yeah,
come on out,
yeah. I
support a
encourage
cause.
everybody to show your support, and it's such a wonderful organization. But this is really changing the lives of like young people and giving them guidance into like whether they choose music for a life or not. It's really showing them like how to work in groups and work as a team and building their self-confidence. I think the biggest thing I see is the self-confidence. This just seems to give them a real focus and a nice sort of ground level like thing for
Mhm.
life. So I'm really honored to be part of Young Lions. It's an amazing
Yeah.
organization.
And they're lucky to have you. You're a great, great instructor. And I thank you so much for being on the show and taking time out of your busy day. I know you're busy and to chit chat with
Yeah,
me.
I,
So I
I had
appreciate it.
students right before this, so it worked out really good. Yeah. So,
All
yeah.
right, perfect. So thank you so much for being on here. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been an honor and a pleasure. Yeah. Thanks so much, Gabby.
Yeah, and we'll see you guys next time on Gabbing with Gabby. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.